flag-off and commencement of the early oil pilot scheme in June 2019 marked the beginning of what promises to be a long but fruitful journey towards full development of Kenya's oil and gas resources. It showed the global markets that Kenya possesses the know-how and infrastructure required to facilitate full field development, which will be marked by the production and pipeline transportation of first oil from Lokichar to our port of Lamu. This early oil pilot scheme has also brought with it prosperity for the people of Turkana, but also the wider republic, with very many local communities directly benefiting from employment opportunities in production and logistics, in addition to the provision of ancillary and support services.
Well, let's now bring in Emathe Namwar, the CEC Water, Environment and Natural Resources for Turkana County, is joining us by way of phone. Thank you, sir, for joining us, picking up from from that clip by the president saying that this particular oil venture has brought prosperity, especially for the people of Turkana and other local communities who are directly benefiting from this. Would you say this is the case on the ground?
I will be able to say a yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
A yes on the fact that there is already some provision on local content, especially in the areas where oil production is going on at the moment. On the no is the expectation to do with 20% and 5% for county government and the host community respectively. But all in all, we want to say that Kenya is already in the right track. First, what we experienced yesterday is a landmark. And number two, the engagement that is already ongoing between the county government and national government is also positive, meaning that all the expectations that will be growing on the oil production economy is going to be a game changer process to do with development, both nationally and within the confines of the county.
What are some of these engagements that you talk about between the county governments and the national government as far as oil is concerned? What do you think this will mean for the locals there?
First, when the oil activity started, the issue of public participation was carried forward. And with time, and even after the promulgation of the new constitution, the provision on public participation is actually enabling both government, communities, to begin identifying the importance of public participation. And this is growing each day. First, when oil exploration began, what came into perspective is Tullow Oil, the contractor, was always in perspective. And both governments, at national and county governments, were not talking. But now, both governments are understanding that Tullow is a contractor, and governments have to go and speak to the community without the intention or without engaging Tullow. And we are seeing positive strides towards that.
All right, thank you very much for joining us here. That is the CEC, Water, Environment and Natural Resources, Turkana County, Mr. Emathe Namwar, just giving us what really are the sentiments on the ground in the county of Turkana, where the oil fields are. And of course, from yesterday, we saw the Deputy Governor ask that there should be a share of the revenue that goes to the county. But let's get back to Mr. Patrick Obath, who's at our city studios. And of course, as I mentioned, is a former CEO of Shell, quite versed with matters petroleum. Earlier on, you talked about, this is going to take a process, maybe 3 or 4 years before we actually realize any benefits economically from this particular venture. So then, for now, what do we expect will be happening for the next 3 years, Mr. Obath?
The first thing is that the reason we are having the early oil export pilot scheme is basically so that the explorer can test the production rate of the fields and make sure that they understand how the fields are going to operate and perform over the production period. This will basically then come out with a product of how much they're going to be able to produce per day, and then decide on the final investment decision. Once that is done, then effectively you have another 2 years of construction of facilities. And then once the facilities are constructed, then we are going to start oil exploration, export. Now, all those facilities are going to be within one area, and then all the different fields are going to be bringing oil to one place. It will be processed, and then it will then be sent down the pipeline down to Lamu. So we're talking about not earlier than 2023 or thereabouts before we actually see the commercial production of oil down the pipeline to Lamu and then into the field outside.
Mr. Mwinyi, earlier on...
I would also like maybe to just...
Okay, let's just finish up, then we'll go
I'd like to jump in a little bit about the issue of putting an oil refinery in Kenya.
Yes.
The minimum size of commercially viable oil refinery at the moment requires about 400 to 500,000 barrels a day of oil. Mm-hmm. Kenya's production at peak will probably be about 80 to maybe 150,000 barrels a day. So to set up a refinery in Kenya, you would need the production of Uganda, the production of Kenya, and part of the production of South Sudan combined to make it commercially viable to put up not a refinery, but actually a fully complex petrochemical plant that actually meets what Mheshimiwa was talking about in terms of it's not going to be a refinery for oil, it's going to be a complex that produces plastics, textiles, fertilizer, pharmaceuticals, and that kind of stuff. And the oil that we know now for driving vehicles and buses is actually going to be a byproduct, which is the lowest value of product that you get. All the others are much higher value, but the size of the export we have at the moment is too small to justify putting up a refinery or a petrochemical complex in Kenya.
Mr. Mwinyi, this negates what you've just called for in terms of, refurbishing the Changamwe refinery and the expectations. What is the status of that refinery currently?
Well, currently it is partly closed. It is placed under the management of Kenya Pipeline. The refinery staff is just there, but they are answerable to Kenya Pipeline Corporation, and there is very little actually happening in terms of operations. So our concern is that training experts in refinery operations is quite an expensive affair, and Kenya has spent a lot of money training the current staff that were employed by a refinery then. And to lose them to another country will be a loss, so definitely. We were expecting this would lead to more people gaining experience by way of training. And as we said, the byproducts which would lead to manufacture of several other products. And we need to have what we call a planning for the future. We are heading there. The way the CEO, former CEO of Shell was actually alluding to. We are leading to that era where we shall be achieving the mark that is actually stipulated. And by the time, I think we'll be ready with the expertise and ready with everything. If we export oil to Malaysia, we are giving them opportunities for establishing job opportunities for their countries, yet we are losing out as a country. So that is my argument.
So pretty much what you're saying is you think this is almost just an excuse that we don't have enough capacity to demand, you know, for a refinery in the country.
But the refinery has been there.
Yes, like for it to be refurbished and up and running once again.
But there was an investor who was ready to pump in money to the tune of 2.5 billion without the government putting anything. And this would definitely have given us the challenge to give them that opportunity to prove that they can run the refinery profitably, and the upgrade will be done, and the other byproducts would also be obtained. That was our way of reasoning. And maybe we are now living in an era where public participation is also required. But in most cases, we see the government making decisions, and then the public is simply just informed, and then that leaves us, you know, with no alternative but to grumble, to complain, and to shout at one another, and which of course does not augur well for a country. Yeah, we believe in the Constitution, which stipulates very clearly that for any major decisions the country has to undertake, and then the public have to be involved, to be explained, so that at least everybody is put in the picture. Otherwise, sometimes we feel there could be what we call vested interest in some of the decisions that are made for example, closing a facility like the refinery and allowing refined oil to be brought into the country. Sometimes we question, in terms of maybe personal interest of those who are in this industry, those who are benefiting in the importation of oil from outside the country, instead of the refinery doing something like that.
So then, are you saying that there hasn't been enough stakeholder engagement on this? As of course you give us your closing remarks?
There wasn't actually much stakeholder involvement. I remember the committee on energy came down to the refinery, but they never came up with any report. They never produced the report. And they never visited the stakeholders who are supposed to give their views. So I believe something was being done behind the scenes to just shut down the refinery, maybe for a few individuals to benefit out of the business of importing oil. That is how we felt.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and I kept demanding for the production, for the production of the report of the Energy Committee then, 2013-2017, about their visit to the refinery, which they have never produced to date. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Obath, have you have the last word? These are concerns we are hearing from Changamwe. We've heard the same from Turkana. How then do we go about this and, you know, exploit or take advantage of this oil exploitation in the country?
I think a lot more transparency in terms of the realities needs to be done. The refinery, Mheshimiwa, I'm one of the products of the refinery. I spent most of my working life there, so I know it very well. The problem with the refinery is that with the size of refinery that it is at the moment, bringing crude oil and refining it, the cost leaving the gate of the refinery was more expensive than importing finished product from the Middle East into Mombasa.
Okay.
So the economies of scale were not there. Even any investor coming in would never have happened.
Okay.
So I think that was the finding of the committee that came to have a look at the refinery.
All right.
So I think the reality is that we have to recognize that whilst we are becoming an oil exporter, we are not going to be a major player in the oil business in the world.
Thank you.
So unless we get the cooperation from the different countries and we work together and avoid political sort of one-upmanship, East Africa will not really benefit as a region from the oil products that we have.
All right, Mr. Obath. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here tonight. Mr. Obath, Patrick Obath, petroleum expert, former CEO Shell. Honorable Omar Mwinyi, Member of Parliament for Changamwe, joining us from our Mombasa studios. Thank you very much for joining us. We also spoke to Emathe Namwar, the CC Water, Environment, Natural Resources, Turkana. Thank you all for joining us. This is a big story. My name is Akisa Wandera. Ben Kitili up next with KTN Prime.